محمد وآل محمد صلوات. Brothers and sisters, we would like to begin the program with the recitation of the Holy Quran by Mandana Imami. Please welcome her with loud salawat. Allah Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله لا يستحيي أن يضرب مثلا ما بعوضة فما فوقها فأما الذين آمنوا فيعلمون أنه الحق من ربهم وأما الذين كفروا فيقولون ماذا أراد الله بهذا مثلا يضل به كثيرا ويهدي به كثيرا وما يضل به إلا الفاسقين الذين ينقضون عهد الله من بعد ميثاقه ويقطعون ما أمر الله به أن يوصل ويفسدون في الأرض أولئك هم الخاسرون كيف تكفرون بالله وكنتم أمواتا فأحياكم ثم يميتكم ثم يحييكم ثم إليه ترجعون هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا ثم استوى إلى السماء فسواهن 7 سماوات وهو بكل شيء عليم وإذ قال ربك للملائكة إني جاعل في الأرض خليفة قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن نسبح بحمدك ونقدس لك قال إني أعلم ما لا تعلمون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Thank you very much for that beautiful recitation. Brothers and sisters, the next part of our program is the main talk by Professor Iqbal Asaria. Please welcome him with loud salawat. Allah Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Professor Iqbal Asaria doesn't need any introduction, I'm sure, but he is a visiting professor at the London Institute of Banking and Finance. He was a member of the working group established by the Governor of the Bank of England to look into issues relating to introduction of Islamic finance in the UK, and he received a CBE in the 2015 Queen's Honours List. Please welcome him with al salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إني وجهت وجهي للذي فطر السماوات والأرض حنيفا وما أنا من المشركين. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum. Unfortunately, it's only last night which we decided to have me because our speaker has come down with flu. So inshallah, I spent half the night preparing, so hopefully inshallah you will all be benefiting from this. I want to start by asking a couple of questions just to make sure that we know where we are. Can anybody tell me what is COP29? COP 29?
The countries come together to discuss the climate change policies and try and create some sort of agreement.
So what is COP? It is Conference of Countries, Conference of Parties or something like that, okay? So 29 means that it is the 29th one, which was just a couple of weeks ago in Azerbaijan, in Baku. And this is the forum in which 157 countries, if I am not mistaken, come together to discuss what to do about, well, climate change, or carbon emissions, or pollution, or things like that, right? Now, to give you an hands up on the thing, 200 years ago, on a summer day, the parliament had to be suspended because the river Thames, which passes just behind the parliament, was stinking badly of sewage. So the stink was so bad that the parliament had to be suspended. It is then that they found that it is, of course, cheaper for any company to dump their waste in the river. They don't have to process it, there's no cost, they just used to dump. But as industrialization progressed, there was so much dumping that the whole thing started to stink. Unfortunately, it's not very different today. We see that sewage is being dumped left, right, and center, and the river has become unfit for swimming, and it is starting to stink. So even after all these lessons, it's the same. And this is a phenomena which we call free riders. Free riders are people who think that we are doing good, others, so I don't need to do, everything will be okay. And the classic example of a free rider, very, very well done. I think I have given you once before, but just forgive me if I am repeating. The Emperor Akbar, one day he told his finance minister, whose name was Birbal, he said, Birbal, I think my people love me very much. So Birbal said, Your Majesty, I'm not so sure, let's put a test. So they put a test, they built a big tank in the middle of the town and told everybody to go up there after Maghrib, put a pint of milk for the love of the emperor and come down until Fajr. After Fajr prayer, the emperor said to Birbal, let's go and see how much milk we have collected, because all night people were going and coming down. And when they looked in, it was full of water. So the emperor came down very angry. He caught the first person and he said, did you put your pint of milk? He said, no, sir. He said, why not? I thought if everybody puts milk and I put water, it will be fine. You see, so obviously everybody has thought the same. These are what we call in economics free riders. People who think that everything is done and we don't need to do it. Well, I can use plastic cups. Others are using reusable cups, so it's okay. Things like that, okay? And this problem also is a different problem of climate change in the sense that it is not confined to borders. Pollution in one place will spread to other places. You cannot say this is the border of England or Iran or Iraq or wherever, and nothing will go this way or that way. Everywhere it will go. So the more you pollute or other people pollute, you will suffer. Can anybody tell me which are the biggest polluters today of the world? Huh?
US, China.
US, China, India, then? Not so much. But Russia? No. Nigeria doesn't have much industrialization. And Russia. China is the first, but per head, US is the first. Because China has got a population of 1.2 billion. US has only 350 million. So obviously China will be more because more people. But US is per head, it is the most polluting country. And as we will see, unfortunately, our good friend Mr. Trump doesn't believe in climate change. He thinks it is a hoax. So we don't need to do anything about it. So we have a big challenge coming. As I said, if the US pollutes, it doesn't stay in the US. It goes all over the place. And recently, last 2 to 3 years, you have seen that, I don't know whether it is a coincidence or it is a direct cause, the number of extreme weather conditions in different parts of the world have increased. Floods, hurricanes, storms, all kinds of things, which were always there, but the intensity and the frequency has increased. And something which Miqdad and Sajjad will like to know is that the cost to the reinsurers of compensating the victims has now gone to, last year was $135 billion from $95 billion the year before. So you can see that, there is real evidence here that there is an actual cost to the thing. Say in Pakistan flood, 30 million people lost their homes. And it's not small. In the last one in America, a lot of people lost their homes and so on. Tomorrow we have a forecast of a storm here. I don't know what will happen. Hopefully in this country we have still not experienced very, very bad conditions. They have been bad, but not that level of extreme. So there is a cost, and it is increasing. And now, compared to 40, 50 years ago, I think most of the scientists and sort of researchers in this field have begun to accept the very idea of climate change. Before 50 years, there was a lot of people who were denying that, no, this is just some extreme people who think this is climate change, but it is not. But now, I think there is a near consensus, if you can say, that there is climate change. And that is why in 1995, we started the Conference of Parties, the COP1. So every year they would meet and discuss, this is our common problem. It is not confined to one place, and you can create headaches. So every year they have been meeting. The most significant one of those was the 2015 meeting in Paris, when they agreed a protocol that we should all work towards limiting the increase in temperature, global temperature, to 1.5 degrees or less, by 1.5 degrees or less. Because calculations show that if it goes beyond 2 degrees or whatever, you will have the melting of the glaciers on the poles, which will then increase the sea levels and climate factors associated with it. And in fact, some countries will disappear from the map of the world. Like Fiji, some of those islands and so on will be completely wiped off. We might lose parts of our shores here as well. So it's not simple, and people were starting to take it seriously that we should try to limit the increase in temperature, which is happening because of the release of carbon, which provides a shield between the sun and the atmosphere, and therefore it traps the heat from the earth up and increases the temperature. And then that brings all the other consequences of climate change. Okay. And so they started to meet in Paris. They wanted to make it binding, but it became nearly binding, but not binding, that every country must put forward a program that by 2030, they will have reduced their contribution to climate change to below 1.5%. And every year since then, there has been discussion as to what to do. The other problem is who will pay for this? Because there will be costs to some countries to reduce their own emissions, especially those countries which are growing, new countries. And so there are, we will come to that, there are discussions on who will pay and how much they will pay. What we need, according to the calculations of the best informed scientists, is $1 trillion per year, okay, to address this question. It's not small, and it's not funny. So let us look at what are the key drivers, if you like, of carbon emission. Obviously, one is fossil fuels, oil, gas, coal, whatever. All our lives, as you can see, are now dominated by this usage of these things for generating electricity, for running our cars, for running our factories, for making the goods which we use all the time. And so it will mean we have to reduce the usage of those things. Some countries which are lucky can use hydroelectric power. But we were, okay, can somebody tell me where we started in the UK? What was the main source of our power? Coal. So coal is the most polluting of the lot because it's pure carbon you are burning, right? So the first thing you want to come out of is coal. Which are the other countries which are still heavily dependent on coal? China and India. So the two big polluters are still heavily dependent on coal, although China has made very good progress in solar. It has installed the largest amount of solar power in the world, okay? So these are the emitters. What absorbs carbon? Trees. Yeah, forests, yeah, and oceans. So if you have to work on both ends. You have to stop emissions and you have to preserve the emitters, right? If you now start cutting forests, you're creating havoc. Where are the forests? Amazon, mostly Brazil and Argentina. Then? Rumisa? Middle of Africa, right? The whole of this Congo and all these places are forests. Then? Malaysia, Indonesia, and that part, they're all forested. especially the Kalimantan shared by Indonesia and Malaysia. So we are telling them, don't cut forests. So they are saying, what shall we do? How shall we live? You pay us to live, we don't cut forests. We don't need to cut forests. But Prime Minister Mahathir once, in one of the COPs, I think if I'm not mistaken, he said, you think we should stay in the jungle all the time so that you can spend freely and emit freely? This is not fair. It doesn't work like that. You have to really talk sense. So we have to work from both ends. The other big emitter is agriculture and animal farming. Especially meat is very, very dense in carbon. Meat rearing, actually not meat itself. So the more meat you eat, so the more meat you produce, the more carbon you will emit, and the more pollution you will have. So you should cut down on meat. Unfortunately, if we look at here, because I think we are 6% of the population, but we consume 26% of the meat. Muslims. So it means that we are eating 3-4 times the meat than normal other people here, right? Any meat. Any meat. Because to breed the meat itself, and there's methane, there's carbon, there's all kinds of things coming out, which compound the problem. The final thing we come to before I go into some other more detailed discussion is that we had once the benefit of listening to a man called Rubens Recupero. Rubens Recupero was the environment minister of Brazil during the first term of Lula, not now, before. And he said, look, we are very, very naive if we say that, okay, 1/3 of the forest is gone, so what is the problem? We still have 2/3 in Brazil. So he did this. He put this paper here, and he said, okay, 1/3 gone. Now what happens? Before half is gone, the whole forest is gone. Because it is dependent. The ecosystem of the forest is dependent. You can't say that only 1/3 is gone. When critical mass is gone, the whole thing will go, and you have a big problem. And it's always stuck in my mind, this is nearly 30 years ago, that this was such a beautiful, simple way of explaining that you can't be playing with the ecosystem as well. So I think there is where we are at the moment in this. The other funny thing is that 2 of the last 3 COPs, the Conference of Parties, one was held in Abu Dhabi, and the last one was held in Baku, Azerbaijan. So the president of Azerbaijan, at the beginning of the conference, he said, oil is a big blessing to us. So we are here to ask you to limit the use of oil, and you are saying oil is a big blessing to us. Don't talk about limiting it. So this idea of transitioning from oil to other things, especially on countries which are dependent on oil, obviously we understand that some countries are dependent on oil, but can you transition or not? The example which is probably the most encouraging of transitioning is Norway. Norway is an oil country. What it has done is that it has started to put its oil revenues, more than what it needs, into a sovereign wealth fund. And that wealth fund, which is now probably the biggest wealth fund in the world, is investing about 60% of its income in environmentally friendly companies globally, and assisting in the whole process to other countries and so on. So it's showing to countries like Saudi Arabia and things that, look, you don't have to be stop using oil tomorrow, but you could be beginning to build a base. But Norway's income from its wealth fund is bigger than its income from oil now. So tomorrow, if the oil is gone, Norway will not suffer any damage to its standard of living. Interestingly, the idea of the wealth fund to Norway was given by an Iraqi. He was running away from Saddam Hussein's regime, and he landed up in Norway, and somehow he met some people, and they said, and then they started this wealth fund. So it's not something which is, alien to us. We can do it. Even countries like Iran have made reasonable progress in solar power in the deserts, but not enough, obviously, because oil is on the doorstep. So I don't think there is even one solar panel in Nigeria, Rumesa, because oil is there, so it's so easy to use. This is the problem. But in Africa, if you look at North Africa, what is there in North Africa? Desert? Desert? Is this desert static? Expanding downwards and taking up more and more of the country, right? So it's called desertification, right? So there is a new project which is called the Green Wall, to build a green wall across the Sahara and stop desertification. The good thing about solar power, if you think about it, is not like oil. Oil, when you use it, nobody else can use it. For solar, if you build another sort of panel next doors, it doesn't affect your output, right? So if you build one going north and one going south, it's the same. So the idea was that if we build these solar power plants in the Sahara and service Europe and and Africa beyond the desert, both sides can flourish. And who were supposed to be the biggest investors in this project? Your friends, reinsurance companies. Because they argued, and still they do argue, that investment in stopping climate change is the biggest savings to them for claims in the future from effects of climate change. So at that time, if I remember, Munich Re was happy to invest about $5 billion, Swiss Re another $3 billion, and so on and so forth, right? Only last week you must have seen that the ex-boss of Tesco is no more with Tesco, has started this project to take from Morocco. Now, Morocco is probably the most advanced in solar power in North Africa. It has got solar stations, and they have named them Noor. So there is Noor 1, Noor 2, Noor 3, Noor 4. Noor obviously is light. And at the moment it's serving inside Morocco, but this guy has started to make a contract that they will take from Noor 4 through the undersea cables, power, and bring it to the UK. And he thinks that will service about 10 million homes in the UK with power. Now, can you imagine if the whole Sahara was populated by this kind of solar stations? 70% of Europe's power problem will be solved, and 100% of Africa's, north of the tropics, power problem will be solved. Plus, near the power solar panel stations, you could build nice caravan type things where the nomads can rest in air-conditioned conditions without any cost. And so there will be also political peace to come. So there are solutions which are possible, but there is not enough money. And that's what I was saying when the COP agreed. COP29 agreed to 300 billion instead of 1 trillion. So you can see the disparity there, okay? So this is then the climate change framework, if you like, with the COPs, meetings every year. Next one is in Brazil, which comes at not at a bad time, because Lula is much more on with it than the previous one. The previous ones are really Trump-like people, yeah, so it's not coming. But then you have a balance of Trump on this side, who doesn't believe in this. Now, just one thing, in the last 10 years, 15 years maybe, okay, who is the biggest oil producer in the world? Huh? USA. USA. And where is this oil coming from? Yeah, fracking. Fracking is even more polluting than drilling, right? So shale production is really taken over quite a lot in America. And America is the biggest producer, because after the oil price shocks and OPEC, formation of OPEC and things, America got frightened and wanted independence in oil supplies. So they did oil. That's why they are the biggest polluter still. And now they don't believe in climate change, so they don't believe in solar, they will not fund it. So they will be continuing to be the biggest. He's wanting to subsidize fracking instead of solar. Trump. Unfortunately, the thing is that it's not they only will be affected. All of us will be affected by this problem. What can we do with them is a question. The UK is in the middle. Then there is another solution which people thought, okay, one of the problems with solar or renewable or wind power, offshore and onshore, tidal power, all that, is that it is not 24/7. In the Sahara, even the sunshine will be about, say, 16 hours, max 14 hours. So what about the other 10 hours? There will be no power. So you can't shut off. So one of the things which has been developing is storage from batteries. You store in the daytime, and you use it in the nighttime. The other one which people have used, even here we have used, is to pump water in the daytime on top to a mountain, and then in the nighttime let it come down and drive the turbines. So there are various solutions to keep the system working 24/7. One of the options in the middle has been to develop nuclear power to keep a constant supply of power, yeah? Say if you stop all the gas, all the coal, all the oil and so on, only have wind power and so on. Nuclear power. Two issues with nuclear power. One is that even here, with all this, even now we are talking about China as an enemy and so on. The two major power stations in the UK are Chinese run. Sizewell B and C. And the new one which is being discussed is also bidding by China. We don't have the expertise. The second problem is that of radioactive waste. All nuclear power generation creates radioactive waste, which takes hundreds of years to become less active or tolerably active. So who is going to pay for that? At the moment, the government is paying, although they claim that it has been privatized, but we are paying for the radioactive waste storage. Okay? The second problem is that sometimes accidents happen, and I'll give you 3 examples. One is Fukushima in Japan. where they had the tsunami and the power plant was flooded and nearly exploded. Still it is closed. The second one was Chernobyl in Ukraine, when Russia was in charge. Again, actually exploded and released radioactive waste, and lots of Europe was affected. The third was 3 Mile Island in the United States, which the core became so hot that it melted into the thing and released radioactive waste. So these experiences, I think they kind of frightened some countries to not to use nuclear power at all. So Germany, for example, said we will not have any nuclear power. Some other countries were much more cautious and so on. And I think that nuclear is not an easy solution, and you can't have it alone. But unfortunately, another big demand for power is coming. Anybody? AI. The running of the AI servers is so power intensive that Microsoft has bought the 3 Mile Island site to reactivate the nuclear reactor. Amazon is thinking of building small nuclear reactors to power its AI capacity. China is using several nuclear power stations to do that, and so on. So there is no win here. You can't get away from all these things. Oil and gas, even coal in some countries. Solar, although the price of solar panels or even renewable wind turbines and so on is coming down, so the cost of generation is not so different from gas production or so on, okay? So we have to balance all this. Now, when you sit in those conferences, you're now discussing with different countries what to do. So the Saudis are saying, you don't tell us not to use oil. And the Americans are saying, we're not interested in this. And the others are saying this and this. And you have to find a way to reconcile this. So this is a global problem. It is not something which you keep it within your borders, we don't mind what happens to you. But what you do is going to create problems for us. So they have developed a kind of loss and damage protocol, that people who have lost and have suffered damages, they should be compensated by the others. It's kind of reparation, but in a very nice language, so nobody feels that it is reparations. But the sums are not coming together. And those islands nearly walked out of the COP29. They said, we're just leaving. I mean, you're talking nonsense all the time and not helping us and so on. But it is affecting big countries as well. I think last Eid, in one of the khutbahs, I mentioned that during Hajj, say if we have 5 million people, how many cups of plastic each one will be using daily? Those of you who have been there, say 5 minimum and maybe 10. So 50 million cups a day, plastic. What happens to them? Dumped. Pollution. So is this where you go to pray? Is this the idea of praying, polluting the whole place? Same in Iraq. I mean, you have this Arba'in, and you have 20 million people coming and going, and the usage of plastic things is the same. And it's not only Muslim. Even in India, you have this Kumbh Mela, which is even bigger and even more polluting, because they also burn bodies and dump the whole ashes into the river there. I remember that Mikdad, my son, when he was in India, one of my friends here said, can you tell your son to bring some Ganga Jal? Ganga Jal means water from the Ganga, yeah, from the Ganges. So I told him, so he came, he phoned me, he said, Dad, are you serious to bring this? I have collected something, but I see that the half of it is full of rubbish from the, because polluted so badly. The other half looks like water, but the other first half. I said, look, whatever it is, you bring it. These guys he brought it and they drank it because they believe it's holy. But you can see the level of pollution. And now that pollution from the Ganges in India goes into Bangladesh because it comes out in the river there in Bay of Bengal. So again, the combination of responsibility, right? How can you stop somebody polluting upriver when you are down the river there? So these discussions are very, very interesting. And unfortunately, I think 60% of the delegates were lobbyists for fossil fuel companies, trying to water down any decision on reducing fossil fuels. Do we have money and time to spend 2 weeks in Azerbaijan lobbying for what we believe? These people they have tens of thousands of pounds. They go and do that. And every word is changed. We saw in the last one, Saudi Arabia even wanted to change the final version, PDF version, and remove the idea of transition from fossil fuel to just say nothing, and so on. Okay, so, but let us say for argument's sake, what happens if we are not able to control the temperature beyond 1.5, maybe 2, and increases further? It's very simple, we are all dead. Because it's, as I showed you with Rubens Recupero, it multiplies very quickly, one over the other, and then you are finished. And the ayah which our sister read, very interesting. Allah says, we are going to create a Khalifa on earth. Khalifa, from the Arabic translated into English, although they didn't translate in the English here, is called a steward or guardian. So we are going to create a guardian for the earth. This is what Allah says to the angels. And look at the reply of the angels, even as more interesting. Are you going to create somebody who is going to create mischief in the world and create havoc? And Allah says, we know what you know not. Inshallah, it will be okay. So this is Allah's promise. So our job now is to rise to the occasion to fulfill our khilafah over the resources of this earth. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much. We have some time for questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. How has this knowledge changed the way you live your life as just maybe a reflection on things that we can do personally?
Okay, one of the issues which I couldn't come to, this is to do with this question, is that we have become super consumers. We need new clothes every year. We need new this every year. We throw away the old ones. We need new phones every 2 years. We need new computers. Imagine the amount of waste you are creating in this process. You don't need a lot of it. We are just about, some companies are beginning to manufacture things which are repairable and upgradable. But just about 5 years ago, everybody wanted to just make disposable stuff, just dispose of it, right? That's one. The other thing is that, and this is what in one of the international meetings we told the Americans, so you are consuming 60 times what an Indian is consuming, okay? Can you now tell us what will happen if the Indians start to consume at that level? We will all drown in rubbish, right? Or the Chinese, or whoever, right? So this whole idea of building economies on the assumption of consumption only, that our happiness is in consumption, more and more gadgets, more this, more that, more this, is not going to be sustainable. We need to be able to live happily with less gadgets. Wear our clothes for 4 years instead of 6 months. And so on and so on. It's all possible. It's not something not, but it's mentality. And yeah, so that's the issue. Economics will have to change. The growth, definition of growth will have to change. We have to go to zero growth, but redistribution will have to come in. We can't have, simple thing. There are some people who are traveling 5-10 times a week by plane. That is the most polluting thing you have. Can you do less? Can you travel by other means? And so on. Can you, well, nowadays, after the pandemic, can you do online meetings? And so on. So there are ways, but it's still the mindset. And one of the big problems, when we were doing research in India, this was a problem. You see, in the villages, life is very simple. But when television came, these villagers in the evening, they sit in front of a television, all of them. And the television is showing them lifestyle in Delhi and Mumbai and so on. They say, oh, I need this, and I need that, and I need that. And these villagers started to spend on things which they never thought they needed. And this is happening all over the world, yeah? That people who don't know, I mean, we didn't know. When we see films, we say, oh no, yeah, this is a nice car, this is a nice thing, nice. So it's only become consumption. There isn't any sense in it.
Any more questions?
I'd like to do a follow-up, if that's okay.
Please.
Is it okay to say everyone is free to fly as much as they like, but every time you fly, you need to plant 1,000 trees? Is that a simple way around it?
It has been tried. So what they say is that, okay, every time you fly, this is the amount of carbon you produce, and therefore you buy that many carbon credits, and somebody can buy from that, and still pollute, because you are selling your credits. So I'm not flying this week. So this 500 credits, Mikdad can have it to use it on his sports car or something, whatever it is, right? So this is how the carbon trading framework works. It doesn't reduce anything. It doesn't change the mindset of consumption. This is the big problem. The mindset of consumption, and consumption is the basis of economic growth, is the biggest problem.
It's very difficult to change one person's mindset when they're surrounded by people who are, for example, enjoying the benefits of being able to travel to the other side of the world for relatively inexpensive prices. So how do you stop that?
It's a life and death choice. It's not like, as I say, it's not a free rider, yeah? It's a life and death choice. If we don't do it, we're all going to die.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question on the Norway thing that you mentioned, that they managed to do something, but that's because Norway is a very rich country in any case. Isn't that how it actually works out for them? And the other bits on the plane travel, instead of traveling plane, travel and train, then how is it plane so much cheaper? I don't understand it than train. Just two different questions.
Okay. So the first question was what? Sorry? Norway. So is Saudi Arabia not rich? As rich as Norway? Yes. So it's not doing anything like that. On the other hand, its wealth fund is spending to create more consumption in the Jeddah region, as you can see nowadays. So it's a question of intention. Norway, of course, became wealthy on oil, but he wanted to use that to get away from oil eventually. Okay, that's this idea. And the second one, sorry? Okay, so this is a difficult one. The price is cheap because the full cost of carbon emissions is not taken into account. If I quadruple your price of a ticket to Pakistan or wherever you want to go, you will go 1/4 of the time, not every other month. So should reflect the real price, and then you will see what happens. If you don't, you are encouraging lifestyle. At the moment, it may be cheaper to go to Paris by plane than to go by Eurostar, sometimes.
Thank you very much. Maybe somebody should tell Trump that where he lives will be underwater if he doesn't do anything about the climate change.
Yeah.
In our religion, aren't we told that the earth is going to get hotter and hotter? Is it not a prediction?
No, I don't think there is that kind of specific prediction. Telling Trump, he will say, yes, you're right, it is a hoax. I mean, until he got COVID, he didn't believe that COVID was real. Even when he got it, he thought vaccines are not real. He started to give them, I don't know what, concoctions of all kinds of nonsense. So, and when he comes back, I just dread to see what's going to happen.
Any final questions?
There is a prediction that the earth will become hot towards the end of time. So this could be tying the two things together, that you will burn yourself to death.
I think we'll end there then. Thank you very much. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Brothers and sisters, just to remind you, the next week we will be having, inshallah, we'll be having Eleanor Chauhan, who will be speaking to us about faith in action. So please do join us then. The rest of our programs continue through the week, including our exercise classes, yoga classes, Dua Kamal program, Husseini Madrasa tuition classes, tafsir classes, etc. So please do join us for those as well.